resolution I can hear you. Give us one more minute. One more minute. Oh, there we go.
Oh, did someone
Yes.
say yes somewhere?
See the indicator here.
Okay. You can go back to the chat and see what. Oh yeah, general. Oh, it seems like the audio is bad. You can hear it on the laptop? Okay, cool. All right, I can even see the transcription from here, which is kind of funny. All right, we're gonna get started. Cool. Well, thank you all for coming out. I know the weather's been kind of bad, so appreciate you all who are adventurous enough to trek through the icy snow. I know it's been kind of intense. So anyway, I'm Sarah. I've been invited to come and talk about interviews and talk about maybe a little bit about what software engineering is like. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This is going to be part talk, part workshop. So you get to hear me ramble for about 30 minutes and then we'll take a break and then actually like do some cool stuff. Agendas are cool. We like agendas. Here's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about who I am. I'm going to talk about what a software engineer is. I'm going to talk about what interviews are, what hiring is. And then we're going to do some mock interviews. Emil is going to try and interview me, which is exciting because I'm a manager and I haven't done coding in a while. So this could go either really well or really poorly. And then we'll take a break and then we'll do part 2 of mock interviews where we will get to do stuff in groups a little bit. You kind of run through the interview exercise amongst yourselves. There is, I guess, conveniently, since there's very few of you in this room, I can actually easily come over and see how different people are doing. We'll do groups of 3 or 4. So I know some of you are alone by your lonesome there. You might want to meet some friends this evening so that you can participate in this exercise. And then we'll have open mic Q&A for really if you have any questions either about interviewing broadly or what it's like to work in industry or whatever's on your mind. I know we started late, like about 5 minutes late, so hopefully we'll cram everything in and we won't keep anyone too long after this. And so let's go ahead and get started. So who am I? So I'm a senior manager. I lead infrastructure security at Shopify. There are 24 people in my org. I have 3 managers reporting up to me. Each of those 3 managers have 7 engineers. I've been at Shopify for about 6 months. Previously, I was at Square for about 7 years. I've spent 5 years as a software engineer. I've been 2.5 years in management. I broadly have been working in the security and privacy space with regards to software engineering and CS for the past 12 years, 7 to 8 years in industry, 4 years in academia. I don't have a fancy degree from like that little fancy university down the street called University of Waterloo. My degree is actually from Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. And more broadly, I've been trained as a software engineer. I mentioned I'm a manager. I don't code anymore. Look at my GitHub. It's so empty. It's very sad. Wow, these images are taking a long time to load. That's weird. So I'm a manager. I don't write code anymore. What does my day-to-day look like? So I mentioned I oversee 3 teams. Day-to-day is meetings. I talk to various people. I talk to people on my team, ask them how they're doing. I talk to people outside my team to be like, what are you doing? Are you doing stuff that is going to impact us? My job is basically devising and executing organizational strategy, which is a lot of buzzword bingo for like, where are we going next? What are we going to be building later in the year? How do we expand the org? How do we expand what it is we're going to do? I support the engineers to build cool things. They build the cool things and I stay out of their way. They complain to me if things go wrong. And broadly, like I mentioned, I set up collaborations with peer teams. We're an infrastructure team, so it touches everything. So we got to make sure that we're not going to go and piss off all of the developers as we just break their entire infrastructure. Nobody can ship anything. So that's me. Thank you for listening to me ramble about myself for 3 minutes. So what is a SWE dev? So SWE, if you are unfamiliar with the acronym, stands for software engineer. I'm aware in Canada that software engineer versus software developer is a bit of a fraught term. I'm going to be using them interchangeably here. For background, I worked in San Francisco for about 5 years, so I still have software engineering suite built into my brain. So if I'm using engineer and you're like, well, I'm not an engineer, I'm a developer, it's just because, like, for me, the terms are interchangeable. So what's a suite or dev? So you develop and engineer software. This is separate from coding and programming. So, you come to school, you learn like how to write code to solve problems. But when you go into the real world, you're building solutions that actually go and do stuff and they make things happen. So you get to participate in the software development lifecycle. So you identify problems. What is the question here? You identify problems, you design technical solutions and architecture. You kind of you think of it as like an artist, you come in, you put in the broad strokes of your picture, you want to figure out what it is you're going to draw, and then eventually you fill in all the details. So yeah, you design technical solution and architecture, you implement the features, test, you got to ship, and then you have a maintenance cycle because your thing is running now, and people rely on it, and you better hope it doesn't fall over, because if it falls over, people get sad. I'm going to talk briefly about different levels of software engineers, mostly because I know some of you are either participating in co-op or internships or are about to go and enter industry as a junior developer, and might want to have a sneak preview of what it means to go from intern to junior developer to senior developer. So typically in an internship, you're given a 3-month project. You're paired with a more senior mentor who helps walk you through different, basically the design and architecture of the project is done for you, and you basically write the features and write the code and ship it, and hope you ship it in 3 months. When you come in as a new grad or as a junior, oh, there's a sad face. I don't know. Oh, sad face, bad audio. Emily, is the audio still okay for you? Okay. Might want to increase the volume, Akshay, on your end, or on your end there. All right, junior devs. Okay, I'll try to not turn around too much, and I think so long as I remember that the mic is here, it's going to be okay. So junior devs, you are assigned features basically to build and to test. You probably get to do a little bit of baby design work. They ask you to try out doing design on your own, design architecture on your own for small features. That is what gets you, when you practice that enough and you get better at it, that's what gets you promoted. So then on the senior side, as you advance the ranks, you go from junior to mid-level to senior to staff to principal. You get larger and larger design and architecting work. You start doing more technical strategy on the org side. So maybe use, as an example for me, I started off building small features for a particular service, but I started at Square. And then over time, I was basically doing more architecting of if we wanted to say support new privacy legislation for the company, what kinds of services would we need to build? What kinds of systems would be affected? What kinds of products would be affected? So as you go up the ranks, the kind of scope of your work increases. I have linked an org chart, and I have no notes to not really, because I don't really remember what it is I needed to put here. But I think broadly speaking, this is to just show kind of an example of an org chart. If you're not familiar with org charts, you should when you enter industry. Knowing where you are in the org is pretty important. So here I have redacted names except for myself, but you can see where I sit in this chart. All of the white squares are the engineers. The orange ones are managers. I report up to a director of production security. Some of the white squares are juniors. Some of the white squares are seniors. Some of them will be working together, either on the same team or across team on different projects. And then depending how work gets created and allocated is really dependent on the circumstance. Most of the seniors come up with the projects and work with the juniors to ship and develop them. Sometimes a junior engineer comes in and is like, hey, I have a really crazy idea. What if we did this thing? And we're like, that seems cool. Let's try it out and see if we can get it done. So yeah, example of org chart. All right, I'm going to talk about interviews. What does an interview look like? What does hiring look like? Warning, there's going to be a lot of text. I'm not usually a person who does lots of text on slides, and so this is a little bit unusual for me. You are all going to get copies, or I'm going to try and give you a copy of the slides with some of my notes afterwards so you can reference it back and take a look at it as a cheat sheet. All right, then. I have a sub-agenda because this section is quite intense. So we're going to talk about types of interviews. We're going to talk about what is an interview panel. So I'm a manager, so I do hire, no hire decisions. I have people who do interviews for me, and then I have to decide whether or not I'm going to bring a candidate on board. So I can talk a little bit about why a hire decision might be made, why a no hire decision might be made. I'll talk a little bit about some of the traps you might fall into when if you're the interviewee sitting in the interview, things that you end up sabotaging yourself on. And then I'll also provide a little bit of a prep cheat sheet. All right, types of interviews. We have a couple different types. Some of these may be familiar to you. You've seen before if you've started interviewing. Some of them may be new. So lead code. How many of you have heard of lead code before? Okay, almost everyone. That's pretty good. Lead code, typically, I call it the pre-filter. So although I think more and more companies are adopting it as like their main screen setup now. So lead code, you come in, you solve like some, I don't know, very mathy, like text crunchy, number crunchy, data structure crunchy kind of problems. I say pre-filter because if you have a referral, then usually you bypass the lead code stage. Lead code often kicks in if you're applying a little bit, you're doing like a cold apply, or a cold call basically, where you're just applying blindly on the site and they send you to lead code because they're not sure if they're going to bring you on for a screen. I think the problems are simpler, although it's been a while, so I don't know if they're switching to live coding and pairing. I'll talk about live coding and pairing. This is typically a setup where it's about 60 minutes. Some places do 90 minutes. You sit down with an interviewer. They give you a problem. It may have multiple steps. And then you code in front of them in like an IDE of some sort, and you try and solve the problem. You should be doing, they allow you to run tests, so you should be testing your code frequently. They often allow you to look up things, so you should always ask, it's like, hey, can I like use Google? Can I like search because I've forgotten the syntax for this like method? And they'll often say yes. We use live coding and pairing usually for screens and onsite. So screens is basically, I guess in a remote environment, some of you may not be aware of onsite versus screen. In the before times, they would fly you out to companies to go and interview and then fly you back home. They don't do that as much anymore, but the screens, it would be the pre-interview to decide whether you were going to come on site. So you would do live coding or pairing for either screens or on site. It's 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the company. And you use the prompts from the interview to try and solve the problem. You get as far as you can in terms of building like a little tiny software solution. Another interview type is take-home samples. This is often a replacement for live coding or pairing. In some cases, lead code, they give you a problem. It's basically homework. Sometimes they tell you you have 3 hours to solve it, and then you have to submit it. Sometimes they tell you have 3 weeks to solve it, and then submit it. So some people like the live coding pairing because they're like, okay, it's an hour, I'm done, I don't have to worry about it. Some people are like, I just get real nervous on live pairing, I have to do a take home. I'm the kind of person where I would rather suffer just for an hour and not for 3 weeks. So I don't like the homework bit anymore. So I really avoid take-home samples, but for some people, the take-home samples are really useful. For both live coding and take-home, or similar to live coding, take-home will also allow you to search whatever you want. In some cases, they may have more stringent quality requirements and testing requirements because they give you extra time and you're not in front of someone. Systems design and architecture. This is typically an on-site interview. You may or may not run into this depending on the level of the position. Basically, this is your typical whiteboard interview. Someone asks you, hey, design a hotel system or design a library system. And you go into a whiteboard. You don't write code. You write a bunch of boxes being like, oh, these things like assume a HTTP server or assume a web server or assume a database, right? And these are going to be connected to each other, et cetera, et cetera. So that's your systems design architecture interview. You may or may not run into that for a junior position or an intern position. Past experience or behavioral is another on-site interview type. This is your sell interview, or this is an opportunity for you to sell yourself. Basically, what did you do in the past? What did you build? Who did you work with? Did it ship? Did it not ship? What did you learn from it? Why are you the coolest person in the world and they should hire you? I've heard people tell me that the past experience interview is usually like an easy gimme interview. So if you're bad at the past experience, you should probably take like a Toastmasters class, or like get better at pitching yourself, or do have a buddy to give you a pep talk so you actually can sell it yourself in the interview. And then the last kind is a sell. It's typically called a sell, and you're like, what the heck is a sell interview? It's not actually an interview. So the sell is something that is with the hiring manager. So in this case, like I would be giving sells. It's called a sell because I'm trying to sell you the job. I'm trying to convince you that you should come and work for me. And it is an opportunity typically for you to come in and ask any questions about what does the team do? What does the company do? What are some common questions I've gotten are like, what are the career opportunities of this company, et cetera, et cetera. So types of interviews. Let's talk about what's in an interview panel. So when you go and apply to a company and you're getting through pretty well, you are given what's called an interview panel. They take a bunch of different engineers at the company. They put together a panel and they ask you a series of questions. These are the steps for an interview panel. So sourcing, recruiting, that's in a healthier market, which I understand, like right now the job market is not great. In a healthier market, recruiters would be reaching out to you, sending you emails, being like, hey, you should come work for us because we're cool, XYZ. If you're like, yeah, I want to go work for you, you go and do a screen. The screen is to see, like, can you code your way out of a paper bag at all? Like, are you a competent human, and can you like type things on a keyboard and like do some basic coding? Then they're like, cool, you are clearly someone who can code a little bit. Let's bring you on site. They'll do the whole interview panel there, where it's like more coding and pairing, maybe systems design, maybe past experience doing a sell, etc. Then they take all of the feedback written by all the interviewers, and they go and do what's called hiring bar. They decide based on the feedback that all the interviewers have given. Do we hire you or do we not hire you? If they decide to hire you, or in either case, like they give a decision, they send you, it's like, hey, you did great, in which case you move into the offer stage. Let's negotiate your offer. Or they'll say, sorry, you did not great. Maybe try again next year. And then after that, any follow-ups to if you decide to like take the offer or need to negotiate more. All right, let's talk about why I might want to hire you. So like say I'm an interviewer, or say I'm a hiring manager, I take a look at feedback. Now this is going to be geared specifically to the live coding, live pairing, because we're going to be doing that mock exercise later this evening. So why would I hire you after doing like a coding interview? Things I want to see. Do you have a clear plan? How are you going to solve this problem? Have you talked it through? Have you explained it to me? You don't have to be like 100% perfect, but you have to have some semblance idea of like how you're going to go and tackle the problem. You have clear communication. Are you mumbling and just like slowly having your sentences peter off into nothingness and are just generally silent? Or are you actually talking through like your thoughts? This is the one case where it's really weird. Like you don't do this in a normal like engineering setting, but you do it in an interview where you just kind of have to pipe whatever thoughts are going into your brain straight to your mouth and say whatever it is you're thinking, like almost constantly. So we don't want to hear that. We want to see like the communication. Like, are you able to clearly communicate what you're thinking? Are you clearly able to communicate questions? You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to ask for clarification if the interviewer is not clear. Do you have some amount of self-awareness or transparency? Like we do want to see you be honest that like if you don't know things. I would rather have an interviewee come and say, when I ask them a thing, they're like, I don't know. Even better is I don't know, but here's an idea I would like to try. What I don't want to see is someone say, I know how to solve this, and then they clearly don't. And then they struggle. and then everyone is just sad. So I'm sad, you're sad because you're not doing well. I'm sad because you're not doing well, and you're clearly aware of it. And it's now just an awkward situation for both of us. So how about we just get rid of that? And you just tell me, I don't know. And I'm like, cool, let me explain something to you. Let me give you some hints. Here's a way to get you on track. Speaking of which, listen to the hints. If your interviewer is like hinting, it's like, well, have you thought about this? Or what about this edge case? Or are you really sure that is the right thing to be doing? Then maybe you should listen to that. You should. I actually did a coding interview when I did have to take this job. Like, it was just one. And I absolutely did not listen to the interviewer. Bless his heart, he was trying very hard to hint to me that I had misread like one phrase of the problem, and I just got it completely wrong. It was kind of funny. But listen to the hints. It's very helpful. They're trying to lead you to the right track. Believe it or not, many interviewers do want you to actually succeed. And so they're trying to give you the hints so that you can succeed, because it is so painful for us to sit and watch you struggle for 20 minutes when you clearly just don't know like what's going on. I was like, okay, let's get you to the right spot. If you're doing lots of testing, there's never not enough testing. So if you're testing frequently, then we get more confidence that you're trying to actually solve it. You're trying to like actually make it work, which is really great. Ideally, you should also solve the problem in the interview. That would be nice. Now, I've had cases where I've issued hire decisions where people haven't actually solved the problem. And the cases where I've done that is because they tick all the other boxes. They're really good at communicating. They have a clear plan. I mentioned here, there's bonus factors. They may like bring in a test suite. You absolutely do not need to bring a test suite into your like coding issues. Like, if you can do it in an hour, holy shit, that's amazing. But like, you don't have to. They're asking questions. They're asking for clarifications. They're very thoughtful, methodical. So that hints to me like this person is probably going to be a good software engineer. He or she or they might be a bit slower about it, but like, I would rather have someone who is more careful than someone who comes in sloppy and is not communicative and is not able to work with me. All right, why would I issue a no hire decision? If there's attitude in the interview, if you're rude to me, you have an ego problem, you come and tell me, I've had a couple instances where people who are just out of school come and tell me with many, many more years of experience that I am clearly wrong and I don't know what I am talking about. If you come that's absolutely like a red flag. If you're not listening to the interviewer, certainly if you're doing constantly like talking over them, not listening to their advice, just completely disregarding their help, making them not heard, that can be a factor. I have here starting too fast and starting too slow. I've seen people just immediately go straight to the code without a plan, and you can tell that they're like, well, I've started running, but I don't know where I'm going to, so I hope I keep running. So I'm going to keep running and hope I don't go off a cliff. And very often they go off a cliff, and then we have to go and pull them back and restart. That's like wasted time, because if you had thought a bit more about the plan, then you wouldn't have gone so fast and off a cliff. I've also got starting too slow. There's definitely you can fall into decision paralysis, analysis paralysis, where you're spending so much time thinking about how you approach a plan that you never actually write the code. So we do want you to at least start and try. So there's a nice middle point there. It's going to be different for every person. You'll find what your happy medium is, but you should find that nice spot for you. If you're trying to impress with tech you don't know, we occasionally get people who come in and say, oh, you use Java internally. Well, I'm going to do this interview in Java. And then you're like, okay, sure. And you're like, but this person, you're thinking in the back of your head, this person listed Python and C++ in their interview. Do they actually know Java? They do not know Java. So don't come in and impress people. Don't come in trying to impress people with languages that you don't know, because you're just sabotaging yourself. If they say that any language is usable for the interview, any language is usable for the interview. Use the language you are comfortable with. Use the language you know. Languages are easy to teach. Software engineering concepts and coding concepts broadly are a bit harder to teach. So we can always teach you new languages. And I've also got listed here the usual HR violations. So if you're being sexist, if you're being racist, if you say derogatory terms, anything that gets you into a meeting with HR. HR stands for Human Relations or Human Resources. I guess how many of you know of HR, know what HR is? Okay, a couple people. All right. Yeah. So the usual HR violations. If you do an HR violation intentionally in an interview, that is an immediate no hire. I've had people who come in with stellar feedback, and then at the last minute, they're clearly racist or sexist, and it's like, cool, you're a brilliant asshole. We're not gonna hire you. So please be respectful of people. Note that I mentioned not solving the problem is not on the list. As I mentioned, I can still issue a hire decision despite not solving the problem if everything else looks good. All right, interviewee traps. These are things that may not cause you to not be hired, but probably don't help you get hired, don't help you do well in the interview. And these are common problems that I see with a lot of different people. I realize that an interview setting, it is extremely stressful. It's especially more stressful in this environment because there's less options out there. But really, like, if you are aware of these things that can happen to you, if you are kind to yourself and give yourself pep talks to come into the interview so you're a bit more confident, it can go a long way. So some things here: overcorrecting yourself. You're wasting time when you're overcorrecting yourself. We see the problem already. You do not need to go and explain the problem to us after we've already seen it. Over apologizing. Anytime an interviewer points a mistake to you, don't say sorry 50 million times, because again, wasting time. We want you to solve the problem. Let's be efficient. We point out a problem. You're like, okay, cool. I see that. Move on. I mentioned decision paralysis or anxiety. Sometimes you are faced with so many decisions, trying to solve the problem. You don't know what to do. Just talk it out with us. We'll help you out of that anxiety, out of that paralysis. We don't expect you, especially for early career folks, we don't expect you to be perfect at making decisions at the start. It is okay to ask for help. Obsession with perfection. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, for sure. So, and that's something that I measure. I try and keep tabs on myself, where you're like, the code must be perfect. It has the perfect variable names. It has the perfect spacing. It has the perfect comments. It has to be in the perfect order. You can be a little bit sloppy where you've got 1 hour. You're not going to ship the most perfect code out there. It's okay. I've seen people come in when they're sick. Please don't show up when you're sick. You're not going to do well. Send an email to the recruiter and say, hey, I'm sick. Can we reschedule? They're like, oh yeah, that's fine. So I've definitely had people show up in person, trying to do an interview and they're clearly sick. They're clearly not doing their best. And it's like, well, you showed up. You're not admitting you're sick. So we have to, grade you based on what you showed up with. If you had just told us you're sick and rescheduled later and you did much better later, then we would have, maybe given you the offer. TLDR, we know you're human. Mistakes happen. Don't stress it. It's just an interview. Yes, it gives you a job at the end, but it's just an interview. You have an option to try again later if you don't get it the first try. All right, I'm going to talk about briefly prepping for interviews. So this is for pairings. Basically, it's just practice. What's going to happen is you're going to go out to the job, or you're going to go out and get a job. You're going to do your software engineering job for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. In my case, apparently 7 years. And then you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to switch companies and interview again. Guess what? You're going to have to practice and brush up your skills all over again to interview. So practice is important. Doesn't matter if you're junior, if you're senior, go back and try again to code in that 1 hour time frame. Super useful. You should always expect that there's probably multiple parts in a coding interview. So if it seems too easy, it probably is, and you should solve it fast so you can get to the next part, so you can do as much of it as possible in that 60 minutes. Get familiar with the IDEs or your coding environment. It's really hard to sit there and watch someone struggle with say they're trying out Visual Studio, or they're trying out IntelliJ for the first time and they're struggling for 20 minutes. And maybe the interviewer is like, I have no idea what that is and I cannot help them. So I'm just going to sit here and wait for them to struggle for 20 minutes until they fix things. And then we'll get started actually doing the interview. So getting familiar with that, making sure that's prepped and ready to go when the interview starts is really, really helpful. Do a little bit of that homework beforehand. And also practice writing in the language or tech stack that you're going to use for interviews. This is my personal preference because of just the different languages I know. Normally for software engineering, I do Java or Ruby or Golang, but I don't like using any of those languages in an interview setting. I use Python in an interview setting, which means anytime I go and interview again, I have forgotten all of my Python. So I have to go back and refresh. And I have to go back and practice again. So practice, 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 go back, remember stuff. Believe it or not, let's see, I got my undergraduate degree in 2011. So that's 12 years ago. I still forget my data structures and I still forget like basic space-time complexity concepts. I forget about sorting and searching. And every single time I'm like, oh, I guess I got to go and interview again. I got to go and look at these references again. So brush up on those skills. Keep like that one textbook or that one set of lecture notes that has all that information so you can reference it later. It's really helpful because then you're just like, oh yeah, this is how all this stuff works. So I can answer it in an interview. They're not going to ask you advanced stuff, but they're going to ask you just the basics. And we get so used to doing this day to day that the basics just like get ingrained in our minds as blind habit, but we forget to actually talk about the concepts. There's a question here. I'll answer the question. The question is, I have multiple intern and part-time role experience in a year. They were short-term roles. Does this create a no-hire decision on the recruiter side? No. Interns are normal. Internships are normal. Part-time roles are normal. Make it clear that it's a part-time role and you should be fine. I have multiple internships. I think Emil's got some internships and some part-time stuff. They're all unrelated too. But they've gotten him hired, so it's totally fine. All right, back to prepping for interviews, past experience. It's very easy to forget what you've worked on. I found out as I was interviewing for a job last year. So spend some time to write your sell yourself cheat sheet. What did you work on? What projects are you proud of? Why are they cool? Who did you work with? How long did it take? What went well and what didn't go well? What were the motivations for some of the design decisions? And then you can go into the interview and then you're like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk about these things. Instead of being like, what did I work on like 3 years ago? I just completely forgotten. So past experience, you're probably going to run into more than the systems design. So that's why I've listed it here. All right. We are 40 minutes past the hour. We're going to take a break because you're probably tired of listening to me talk for nonstop. So let's do a 5-minute break. You can come chat with me in that time. We'll come back in at, say, 46 past. Sound good? Cool. Thanks. And then for the 3 folks, you might want to find friends.
Did you code
when I started? Oh yeah. Okay.
I was thinking like maybe talk a bit about the first.
Yeah.
Like internship.
we're gonna do some weird science because. Oh, I've already forgotten this. Let's see. All right. We're gonna do something a little bit odd, and I'm. Let's see. What am I gonna do here? The mic is here, but maybe.
What?
I think I want to switch. Yes, basically. So I'm gonna do that. So. Yeah. All right. We're right back as I change screen. So, and then I'll talk more after.
Am I doing something with this microphone? I feel like I have the least idea what. Just... Oh.
I have to unplug the.
Can folks still hear me? Yes, cool. All right, we're gonna do something really weird. We are going to. So Emil, how for the folks in the back? Can you still hear me from here? All right, cool. To use my projection voice despite this next activity. So what we're gonna do is Emil's going to be my interviewer, which is very. We're going to have Emil live interview me on thankfully a coding question that he's aware of. Kind of. There are some disclaimers to this. This is going to be short just because we don't have the whole hour. So I'll see how far I get. I have not done this in a while. So it's going to be very exciting to see how far I do actually get. What you're going to see, I'll look for is things like how does one behave in an interview? What are the good things? What are maybe the less good things? We may call them, Emil might call them out specifically, Emil might not. You'll see, Emil's obviously not an experienced interviewer, but he is going to pretend he is by asking me a series of like random questions, and it should give some indication of like some questions that might show up in the interview process. So, and then the other thing you get to do is you get to see my code live.
Actually, never done it.
Okay, computers. How do computers work? Step one, it helps to know how a computer works. Okay. That's not that. I thought did I just like close it all? Maybe I did. All right. Candidate. The thing about doing live demos is you hope the demo god, because all right, I think open selection menu, cool. All right, let me sandbox. Emil, you should be able to see it now on that screen too, right?
Yes, I do.
All right, cool.
Sorry.
But, oh, okay. Okay, let's mirror. System settings, main display. Cool. Now you all can see it. Yes. All right. Maximize. Cool. Great. All right, this is CoderPad. How many of you have used CoderPad before? No one. You did? Oh, okay. One person has used CoderPad. Cool. All right. CoderPad is basically this like very, very limited kind of IDE system, or like a little like text editor, but it can run code in it. And it's really cool because especially for remote interviews, you can have the browser like with CoderPad on your screen, and the interviewer can be like miles and miles away and also have the same view. Both you and the interviewer can like write stuff into the like text edit, into the text editor, into the code. Both of you can run and test stuff. You can select something, and the interviewer can see it. So it's really, really cool as like a pairing like interviewing tool.
Visual Studio also has this feature, right?
Yeah, Visual Studio also has this feature now. which is cool. I haven't used Visual Studio that much, and I have especially not used Visual Studio in an interview setting. I do know CoderPad is used primarily in an interview setting because there's so many people who like don't have corporate accounts, and so like you just want to send out a link super easily. But yes, Visual Studio does the same thing. Cool. I'm showing CoderPad mostly not because it is the de facto tool out there. There's a couple of them out there, but just as an example. So CoderPad, I'm gonna use. You're in for a treat because I also haven't programmed Python in ages, so this is gonna be very exciting. So ML. I guess since you don't have a mic enabled there, unless you want to turn on the mic there and talk.
Sure.
Do you want to explain the programming problem to me?
Do we have a reference somewhere?
It's in the slides actually. Otherwise, I can pretend to be an interview in this fun spot to talk about to present the problem.
See if is it in the comments?
Yeah, it's in the comments.
I cannot see the comments.
Okay, I'm just gonna do it.
Just go for it.
Also, for what it's worth, I am not able to see the chat. So if any chat questions come up, please forward them to me because I am not able to see it. All right.
Sounds good. Okay.
The programming problem. So this is a question that I used to give a bunch of times, but it's basically we're going to implement a big number calculator. What is a big number calculator? Well, the semantics of the word big number in big number calculator is meaningless here. But basically, the idea is we want to be able to perform arithmetic operations on two arbitrary numbers. The numbers are going to be represented as strings. So they're also limited to integers. So no negatives, no decimals. Actually, positive integers, no negatives, no decimals. And then basically you want to have string, somehow add them together, and then you get the added output as a string. If we're lucky, we get to go through multiple parts and we get to see the other parts of this problem. But let's start with addition. All right. So what I'm going to do, gosh, it's been a while. The problem set here is given two strings that represent numbers, big numbers. Right.
And when we mean strings that represent numbers, we're saying like the string 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, so like the string 1, 2, 3. Write a function that adds them together. And so in some cases, I might give a prototype. So I know this is Python, and I know I think most of you know C and C++. So bear with me here. But some of it might be similar to things you programmed in class. So there's a function def. You use def to define functions. So say our method prototype here is going to be def add or add nums, and then I'm going to have number 1 and number 2. Okay. Cool. I have two numbers. I'm going to go ahead and write some sample test cases here. Oops. Test cases. Nums. I'm going to put some sample numbers here. So let's say, I'm going to just do 7 and 9 at the start. Right now, this shouldn't print anything because it should just be, yeah, okay. What? Runtime error. Why do I have a runtime error already? Solution 3. Oh, because I've accidentally imported this thing called profile function for some reason. Okay, cool. And it should print 9. Cool. That's what I expect. All right. Well, I have a problem here. I have these things that represent as strings. There's nothing that can natively add those strings together. So I need to convert them to numbers or to digits in some way. With this test case I have 2 single digits. So what I could do is, so I think Python actually has a function to change arbitrary length strings into numbers super easily. So one of the things that you could run into is in other languages, you can have, you have a max int, min int. Some of you may have run into this before. So basically, the computer can only store so many bits of information to represent a number. On earlier architectures, that's 32 bits. Nowadays, you have 64 bits, sometimes even larger. So writing a big number calculator is useful in cases where you want numbers longer than that. I'm going to put my interviewer hat on. The case where this is useful and interesting is for some certain aspects of cryptography where you're doing operations on very, very large numbers. So I'm going to take off my interviewer hat. It's a fun fact for all of you today. Okay, but here, so Python does have a feature to arbitrarily turn strings into large numbers. I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist and I have to write my own. So I can only do it digit by digit. And what I'm going to do here is actually, I'm going to go ahead and add another task case because I'm thinking about this already. Whoops. Ignore that. I'm going to go ahead and do 100 and say 51.
The green is frozen on my side.
Oh, is it frozen on your side?
Yeah.
It is definitely presenting on my side.
Just if you can stop sharing and share again.
Yeah, okay.
We have. This seems to be a recurring problem with Bevy.
All right. Cool. Is it working now?
Okay. Good.
All right. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take a look and run through the cases I have here. I have 7. So I have a case with 2 numbers which are each single digit, and I have a case here where one of them is 3 digits long and one of them is 2 digits long. I can't just go and loop from left to right because with the 100 and the 51, okay, I'm just going to go ahead. How do I add? Let's go back to grade school. So 7 plus 9. And as an aside here, this is something I actually go and show people with ASCII art. Like 7 plus 9, what do we have? 9 plus 7 is 16. So 9 plus 7 is 6. Carry the 1, becomes 16. Let's talk about 100 and 51. How do we add that? So we have 1 and then 5 and then 1. Let's add another complicated case. Well, we'll come to that. So basically, what I'm finding out here as I am learning how to add again, that I have to go from right to left and not left to right. So what am I going to do? That means I probably need to loop the string from the right side as opposed to the left side. What's an easy way to do that? I could do a crazy for loop and be start from the very end and move backwards, but that seems very complicated and I'm lazy.
To interrupt you, why do you have to move right to left?
Why right to left?
Because I think the unit digits are present on the rightmost side, right?
Yeah, so the unit digits, so the ones place is on the right and then followed by the tens, followed by the hundreds. So with a 51, there is a 100 spot, but it's not visible. The only way you could do it is if you added a 0. So actually a trick you could do is, well, these are different length strings. We could make them all the same length. And the way we could make them all the same length is just pad them with zeros on the left. So that's another solution that we could do. Actually, let's do that because you suggested it. So what we're going to do is we're going to check the length of number 1 and number 2. So num1 length equals len, equals len number 1. And then num2 len equals len number 2. And then if num1 len is greater than num2 len, then what this means is we need to make num2 the same length as num1. So for I in, pretend this is for I equals 0, I whatever. I'll write a translation in just a moment. For I equals, okay, how many? Oh, actually, no. I'm looking at the 100, I'm looking at the 51. The number of zeros I need to add to the 51. So 100 is 3 digits long. 51 is 2 digits long. 3 minus 2 is 1. I need to add 1 0 to the 51 to make that work. So if num1 len is greater than num2 len, I do extra zeros equals num1 len minus num2 len. And then for I in range 0, extra zeros. This is basically, I'll write a comment here for those of you who don't know Python. For I equals, no, I is less than extra I plus plus. And then I'm going to do number, because this is num2 len is less than. So number 2 equals 0 plus number 2. And then I want to do the same thing the other way around. So if num2 len is greater than num1 len, I'm going to reverse all of these. And then I add a bunch of zeros to number 1. I don't know if this is going to work, so let's hope it does, actually. Let's make sure that I'm going to reverse these to make sure. A7, 300. Okay, this should. I'm going to print a bunch of nuns. Okay, cool. We have 7, 9. We have 151. Okay, that's the correct zeros. I'm going to add like a bajillion more zeros to that. There we go. Okay, they're the same length. Cool. Making them the same length is still pretty nice. We still want to go from right to left because of in the case of 7 and 9, you have 16, you have to carry the 1. So let's actually do that with proper logic. But now we don't have to worry about lengths anymore. So let's say for I in range, I don't know which one is, it doesn't matter. Okay, sorry. As you may notice, I really talk to myself and I start a sentence and change my sentence 5 times as my brain short circuits. So screen share is frozen again. Okay, I'm fixing that again.
Maybe it's just no.
It's fine. All right. We're going to iterate from the ones place to, the infinite number of tens or thousands place here. So this is our index. I is our index. We're going to take those first 2 characters. So, math. And take okay. So Python has this trick. Really silly. You can just do -I. So digit 1 equals number 1, -I. Okay, I'm not going to actually do that because it's mean. And then number 1 I minus 1. Digit 2. Same deal.
And why did you subtract another 1 at the end?
Because, so the length of number 1, let's take an arbitrary value like 3. I'm iterating for I from 0 to less than 3, so 0, 1, 2. But I want to do it backwards. I want to reference index 2, then 1, then 0. Now, if I take the length 3 and I just minus I, if I run through it in the loop, it starts off with 0. So the first run I is 0. 3 minus 0 is 3. That's an invalid index. Did everyone catch that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you always add -1 to that. And sometimes you forget, and then you run into array out of bound, index out of bounds errors, and then you're sad. Okay, so digit 1, digit 2. Now I need to actually convert them. I've actually forgotten how to do that. So let's see. What can I do? I can do is that going to be a character? Maybe. What happens if I do digit 1 minus 0? Does that work? Nope, it doesn't work. Okay. Again, Python, get character. I'm going to search for Python. I'm searching Python string. You can watch search instead. How about this? string to int. How to convert a string to int? Is it just? Oh, this is a stupid article. I don't like that. Is it just int? It is just int. Okay, cool. That's easy. All right. Is that gonna work? Is that gonna work? Okay, yeah, I guess it does. I guess it does work. Cool. All right. Int y equals int digit. Int 2 equals int digit 2. I'm going to sum equals int 1 plus. Oh, actually, edit equals int 1 plus int 2. Emma, by the way, I'm going to try and stop at 8:15. So I'm going to furiously try and solve this problem now. All right, so I've added those first two digits. However, there is going to be, sometimes it's going to be more than 10. So I need to check for that and have that carry. So in that case, I need a carry variable here, carry equals 0. I'm going to do carry equals added divided by 10. And I think, can Python integer division? Do I have to do something? I have to do floor division. Okay. Floor division / digit equals added modulo 10. And then I need to create my result. Result equals that. And then I'm going to do result equals, oh, actually, this needs to add a carry. Result equals digit, third digit plus result. And then, okay, so what I'm doing here is I take each digit, I convert it into an integer, I add it together, I add a carry if there is a carry. I recalculate the carry from that addition, and then I get the digit out that is not the carry. I put that digit into the result string result on the left side, and then that carry keeps going. Now I will exit the loop and I might still have that carry left over, so I should check for that and add it at the very end if it's still there. So if carry is greater than 0, result equals, I guess, I mean, doesn't really matter either way because it's just going to be 1 equals store carry plus result. And then the most important thing is returning. You got to return your result. All right. See if this works. So 7 plus 9 should be 16. Cool. 100 plus 51 is 151. 3 million plus 87 should be 3,087,000. Now the cool thing is going to be, oh, okay, sharing.
Apologies for if the screen is freezing. Seems to be an issue with
All right.
Coder.
Does this work? Cool. All right. So these are all like pretty easy except for the 7 plus 9. Let's do some tricky ones. Let's make sure we're getting all our cases here. Let's do 9999 and 1. And they should present, there should, I'll add another. There should be 9, there should be 1 million, right? Cool, it's 1 million. I'm going to do a test case that has, that should only like do the carry for 1, but not the others. Okay, cool. I've done addition. I've done that in 25 minutes. The code is not the nicest. I could probably be better about the code a little bit. In that there might be some refactoring I can do where I can put like, say here, just int around here. I could maybe rename some of these a bit better. I don't want to take so much time, so I'm not about to start multiplication, which is this whole thing. But before we go on break, any questions about, I guess let's questions / things you spotted / any clarifications you need. Yeah, question.
About testing for this example, should we consider having invalid input?
Oh, that's a good idea. Yes, so you should consider invalid input. I did not do that here. Let's see what happens when we add invalid input. I'm sure it's gonna just break horribly. A and 5. Yeah, okay. So what I would probably do, you should add things to catch for errors. So you should be an interviewer. That's a good interviewer type thing. Okay, how could I check this? How could I check this? I think the easiest thing I can do is do this, try. And then, is it try? Yes, accept. And then I would maybe just return. You can what you could do is ask the interviewer how do you want this error case to handle, and they'll either say handle it, or they'll be like, oh, you should print out this particular message, or you should return this particular thing. So I'm just gonna make a decision here of I'm just gonna return 0, 0, and call it a day. So what is gonna happen there is now if there's invalid input, and for what it's worth, this is also not great Python because you're supposed to have the specific exception, and I'm just catching all exceptions and returning. Don't do this at home, kids. So yeah, now if I try and add invalid input, it's going to return a 0 here. But yeah, that's it. You should be trying to handle invalid input or asking, clarifying with the interviewer any assumptions. Yeah.
How fast is your summer solution?
This should be O of n, because it's n is the length. Could be O m plus n if you really, or I guess whichever is greater, m or n, if you really want to be pedantic. But it's O of n. It's linear time. Other questions?
It's a question from the chat. Why didn't you just use like int number 1 plus int number 2, like just directly converting both parameters?
Because I am programming fast and not thinking ahead. That is the only reason. But yes, if you had some time or thought a bit more, if you were a bit more thoughtful, you could refactor and make that better.
Oh, I think maybe what the question's meaning is like instead of like iterating through each index.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Just typecasting the whole thing.
So this is the premise. So this is what I mean about like Python is really smart and can actually support that. But I mentioned this is a big number calculator. And the reason I'm saying this is a big number calculator is on various other languages besides Python and on various architectures, there is a limit. You can only convert strings up to a certain size to their number representation. And this is what I talked about, like 32-bit, 64-bit, right? It only is 2 to the 32 minus 1. Yeah, 2 million something. So you can't do it for all numbers. So that's and also that breaks the premise of this problem. So then, yeah.
So I guess a good thing to like note is that if you choose a language like Python, where it gives you a lot of conveniences.
Right. So this is why I use Python, because I also, when I was about to go into industry, the languages I knew a lot were C and Python, and I was definitely not going to do this question in C. Absolutely not.
It's not good.
It is possible. I've seen people do it in C, and I'm like, you're a much better C programmer than I am. But Python gives you a lot of nice little data structures and string manipulation techniques that make it super easy, and also indexing. So I mentioned here, like, I have this indexing len number 1 minus I minus 1. In Python, you could just literally type -i and call it a day. And it's just super cool that you can just be like, I can magically iterate through a list backwards and nobody cares. All right. Other questions, comments?
Could you solve this using big voice map?
Oh, one person has tried doing that in the hundreds of times I've given this interview. And he did it. And I had no understanding of his answer.
Did you get a job?
He did get a job, yeah. He was also a hardware engineer, so that was the thing he knew a lot about.
smartest.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's definitely a risk, like to solve the problem and your interviewer just has no idea what you're doing, but not recommended. Any other questions? I'm curious, what things did you, oh yeah, question.
Oh no, what things did I notice?
Yeah, okay, good. What things did you notice?
Like while you were going through it, I heard a lot of like word vomit coming out of your mouth. It's like all of your processing from your brain. And,
Yeah.
Like you're saying it out loud before you actually like typed it out. As like, yeah, I can hear it. It sounds correct. Now I'm actually gonna type it out, sort of thing. Is that this type of things that they're looking for?
Not necessarily. That's more my personal style.
Okay.
Is word vomit, because speaking it out helps me also process it. For me, with other interviewers, like sometimes they follow it and sometimes they don't. So like Emil has paused me a couple of times during my word vomit to be like, but actually, what are you doing? And that has happened to me a couple of times when and people like pestering me. But you do not need to do the word vomit. But doing the word vomit is the easiest way to be ultra clear with your interviewer without any effort. That's for sure.
I assume you want to think about it sort of like a driving test. If you remember, you're what I'm trying to say, instead of just looking with your eyes at the
Yeah, you're
mirrors,
narrating what
right,
you're
you
doing.
want to, and when you park, you say like, oh, I'm turning the wheel this way for blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
That sort of
yeah. So some of the word vomit is just like me reading it, and some of it is just like, oh, okay, I've figured it out in my head. Okay, let me translate it to the interview. This is what I'm going to do, by the way. I'm going to go do it. So any other things people noticed?
Yeah.
Is there a question in the chat?
Oh no, I was just going to say something that I noticed is when you got the problem, you first started with some test cases.
Yes.
So that like, hopefully, if you're writing like a test case that doesn't make any sense, ideally the interviewer should.
Yeah. So basically, so that's one of the that's a good point. So I started off by writing test cases because the interviewer has explained to me the problem, and I need to make sure I actually understood what the interviewer said. And the easiest way to get that up front is to start writing some test cases showing the thing that you're gonna like write or what you're probably going to be writing next. And then that way they can step in and say, no, you're absolutely wrong. Or they are like, no, actually that is the understanding that we've both come to. Cool, you can proceed, right? Sometimes interviewers will come in with like method prototypes and tests pre-built because it's probably because they've spent like 20 minutes trying to explain it to the interviewee and it's never worked and they're like, okay, we give up. But sometimes they come in and they're just like giving you a verbal problem, and then you have to kind of interpret it and try and like translate it into what it is that they're actually looking for. As an interviewer for this problem, I usually do the verbal thing to see what people like latch onto. I historically have interviewed like interns all the way up to like very, very senior candidates. And I just throw it out there to see, where are they going to start faltering? Almost always a lot of the junior candidates are like, I don't know what you're saying. You are speaking like Greek to me. Like, can you like explain a bit more? Like they're really hesitant. So I help them out there. But the senior candidates, they sit there like part of me testing senior candidates is, can I give them a vague problem and can they translate to a concrete solution? And if they're not able to do that, they're not eligible to be a senior candidate. So, and I probably don't want to hire them. So, yeah, different opportunities. Anything else people notice? I think any last things people notice before I send people on break?
I think you could save some nice on extra zeros by doing the absolute difference.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. So one of the things you could always do is come back. People are now in the critiquing my solution stage here. No, it's fine. But it's a good point to bring out is if you solve it fast and it's clear that the interviewer is struggling to have a great conversation with you, you can do one of two things. One is you can go back and like optimize your solution, refactor it, make it cleaner because your first pass is going to be real rough, right? And you can clean it up and make it a bit better. The alternative is you can just check in with the interviewer and say, hey, so it looks like we're done. Do you want me to clean it up? Do you want me to optimize? What do you want me to do next? And sometimes like the interviewer is like, I've got enough signals. Like, I know I'm going to hire you anyway, probably because you finished it in like 25 minutes. Great. And then you can just chit chat about like what it's like working on the company, what team they're working on, just other like broader things about the company that are really cool. So I've had that happen a few times. I've been also in the other, in the interviewee situation where I solved the problem really, really fast. And it's like, cool, I'm going to ask you like weird, nerdy shit now about the company. But you always check in with the interviewer about like, because maybe they do want you to do some cleanup because they want to see like, can you refactor? Are you self-aware about how messy your code is? And then in other cases, they don't care. And it's like, okay, cool, just chit chat. All right, let's take a break. 5 minutes. Come back at 25 past. I'll still be, I'm sitting here at this desk. I don't want to get up now. So if you have questions you want to talk to me about, I'll be monitoring the chat, / you can come chat with me here. Cool. Great. Hope that was fun. All right. All right, we are 8:28, which is 3 minutes after 8:25. So we're gonna go back here and let's see what I have for my slides, or have I already lost them? Interview.
By the way, Praveen, I got my, how do you call it? Praveen or Gavin? I got my.
All right. So what we're gonna do is we have a couple options. Just because of timing, we're definitely a little bit, yeah. Oh yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Share. Let me share. How do I do this? Presenter view. Can I do this? Oh, it's mirrored. Okay, here we go. How many times? The answer is very many times. Stop mirroring. Cool. All right. Okay. This is the Sarah Has the Science displays again because I cannot see. And where is my mouse? Oh, here we go. I really should use shortcuts. All right. So, let me share the screen so the hybrid folks can see it. Great, here we go. All right, we have a few options here. It is 8:30. My original plan was to have all of you try doing a mock interview. We could do that for 20 minutes. I'm seeing some yawning though in the audience, so people might be getting tired. And I totally understand. It's 8:30. It's quite late. So we can either do the mock interview for 20 minutes. So you all try doing interviews with yourselves. I don't know if how many of you've got laptops with you right now? Okay, got a couple people. Okay, cool. So we could do that, or we could have a 30-minute long Q&A. So who wants to do group mock interviews? Raise hands.
I don't have a laptop.
The one person wants to do it and he does not have a laptop. Oh, 2 people. But you're slow, so okay. How many people want to do a 30-minute Q&A about either interviews, software engineering, more broadly, anything? Raise hands. All right. Overwhelmingly that. All right, so let's do 30-minute Q&A. Ask me anything.
I think there was a question.
And for people in the chat,
Yeah,
please
there was
ask any questions.
There was a chat very early on.
Yes,
Yeah,
there's a question about.
did I code when I started? Okay. Also, let me make sure I can. Q&A, cool. All right, there was a question in the chat. Oh yeah, cool. Good for everyone to come up here. There's a question in the chat. Did I code when I started? When I started in industry, I did code. I did code a lot. So I was a software engineer for about 5 years. I started as a early to mid-level engineer. I got to skip the new grad thing because I had 4 years in PhD, and they were like, wow, you're a PhD student that can actually code. That's pretty cool. Because not all PhD students can code. So I did that for a bunch. And I went from, I got promoted twice. At Square, they have 2 mid-level levels. So I got promoted twice and then got to senior level. And then I did a bunch of senior engineering, and then I switched to management. So done a lot of coding before switching to management, where I now do 0 coding. There's a couple questions about LinkedIn profiles. I think that's something where people should link me the profiles after the fact, and I can take a look and provide comments. Besides that, any other questions? What other questions folks have? Yes.
With all the interview resources coming out recently, do you feel the difficulty of coding interviews has intensified?
Yes and no. So it used to be that interviews, quote unquote, okay, so it depends. So like meta comment, it depends is the worst answer you could possibly give anyone. So I deeply apologize for the number of times I'm going to say it depends in the next 30 minutes. So it depends. For some companies, as you come in, the interviews are pretty easy because they're basically behavioral interviews. They're basically what have you done before, and they don't actually test technical prowess directly, right? Hands-on keyboard technical prowess. For a while, the stereotypical Silicon Valley interview was the whiteboard interview, which some of it was systems design, but some of it was also like literally writing code on a whiteboard. So I've interned at both Google and Facebook. I've certainly interviewed at both of them as a result, interviewed like on site. And there was an instance in 2014 where I went on site to Google and they were like, hey, write some C code to solve this problem. And they gave me a whiteboard and I literally had to write C code on a whiteboard. And it was absolutely the how many curly braces and like, where am I? They're like, well, what about this edge case? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to put like, how do you test for errors? I'm like, okay, if like in tiny text on the whiteboard, if error equals whatever. And that was like, to your point, that was one of the things that was most difficult for a lot of people, was trying to write code on a whiteboard was just horrible. It was a horrible experience. Very few people could actually do it well. And maybe it like negatively impacted who actually got hired that was actually competent. It certainly like had a lot of, I think, false negatives as a result of that. Since then, people have realized, maybe we shouldn't have people write C code on a whiteboard. Maybe we should like have them like test it and see if like, because testing is like what you do in software engineering, and you should run it a bunch of times and you should be able to refactor it super easily. So from that perspective, it's gotten easier broadly in the industry. But then it's also now gotten hyper competitive. So it's quote unquote gotten harder again. So with all of the guidebooks coming out right now, I'm going to put a spicy hot take. I don't like lead code. The reason I don't like lead code is because I think it focuses on more mathier problems that not everyone is going to be great at, and algorithmic problems that not everyone is going to be great at. Despite having gone through a PhD program, I'm not an algorithmic theory person. I'm a practitioner, right? The shock on your face that like someone who went to a PhD program was like not an algorithms person. So as a result, like those, and I've interviewed at places which have given me algorithmic problems or lead code type problems, and I've just done horribly. I don't get the job. So a lot of the interview prep is for specifically that, to get you thinking in the like, what are the tricky like algorithm things that like you often see in an interview setting, and how do you solve it, and how do you solve it fast, and how do you talk through it, and how does it work? I simply do not have time to sit through the patience of those interviews, so I try and avoid them as much as I can, but not everyone has that ability, right? So like in those cases, that's really useful. Some other interview preps are more geared towards like, they're often geared towards people who are coming from, say, like, I don't know, they're a web dev for like a dentist practice in the middle of nowhere, and they want to do web dev at a big corporation like in downtown Toronto, right? And it basically comes in and preps them for like the expectation difference, because to go and do web dev for your local dentist practice, you probably just show up and say, hey, I can put some pages together and click some buttons and it works, right? But to do it like at someplace downtown, like in downtown Toronto, right? It's like a big corporation, there's lots of different steps, there's a whole method to the madness, right? And so some of the prep is geared towards those kinds of folks who are trying to break into the industry like broader with a more limited background. So with any kind of guidebook, so it's hard for me to recommend specific books. I know Cracking the Coding Interview was very popular a couple of years ago because it really kind of provided a lot more visibility into how these interviews are at these companies, especially as more and more companies adopt these kinds of interview practices. But over time, I think the knowledge is getting spread out a lot better. So it may be useful, it may not be useful. Whenever looking at some guides, always take it with a grain of salt. See if it works for you. It might work for you. It might not work for you. If it doesn't work for you, trash it. Use some other book, whatever. And then keep in mind that interviewing practices do change over time in the industry. So what was common 10 years ago is not as common today. What's common today is not going to be as common 10 years from now. And you do have to adapt if you want to remain competitive. And you have to kind of keep up to date with with what's going on. It turns out, though, the easiest way to keep up to date with the interviewing practices is when you're at a company, you become an interviewer. So you get to see what the other side is, and you're like, oh, the trends are changing in this way. And then you're like, oh, I guess this is what all the other companies are doing. And that kind of makes it easier to keep up to date. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question. Did that answer your question? He's like, I've forgotten my question.
Yeah,
That's
guess.
the trick to answer.
Yeah, there's definitely no definite answer, right? Like,
Right.
They're harder in some ways or just different.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it feels it's gotten crazier because I have the book. I have Cracked.
Yeah.
You try too hard to compensate for it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question, and I think it applies to probably a majority of people here, is that we have co-ops coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, and I think for maybe those of you that have had co-ops, the interview process is a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more like easier. I want to say, do you have any thoughts or like advice or?
All right. So I've obviously not been in a co-op program at Conestoga College because I do not have a degree here. So do you want to, maybe Emil, do you want to talk to me a little bit about like some of the interviews that you've done, or even Gavin, I guess, some of the interviews you've done, what they're like?
Yeah.
Like what they ask?
Sure. Yeah, I think, and like I think this applies even like from what I did at Waterloo, which is in psychology, not CS.
Mhm.
So don't think I'm impressive in any way. And maybe I should have my mind. But like I think sometimes
What ends up happening is there's a lot less structure in like the smaller company stuff. So like for me, like when I interviewed at Descartes, they kind of just asked me some random questions about programming. And so it's very much like on the spot, you know it or you don't kind of thing. If I was to offer advice, which is not really my purview, but if I was to offer advice, I would really suggest not focusing on one language per se, but focusing on like the general, like a lot of like software, like concepts. So like the question I was asked was like, what's a string builder in Python? And I never heard of that, but I knew what like a builder design pattern was. So I was kind of like able to like be like, oh, I think a string builder is something that like you like configure it some way, and then you call some method called build, and that will retrieve you the string. It was good enough to get hired. So
Yeah.
I think the main difference is maybe for like at Conestoga is like the interviews are a lot less structured. And it's kind of like
for me,
it was like very much like
it's a conversation.
like
Yeah.
And it's not to say that
it's like any easier, because in some ways like having like a coding like peer coding interview is sometimes nicer because you can like ask questions and stuff. Like for me, if I didn't know what that string builder stuff was, I probably wouldn't have got hired. Like it was kind of like a yes no thing.
Yeah, so I guess to add to that then, that is obviously going to be more of a concepts and knowledge based kind of interview, right? Do keep into consideration that A, they know you're coming from Conestoga, B, they've probably looked at your resume, C, they, depending on what year you're at in the program, they have a sense of like what courses you've probably taken and what things you probably know. If it were me in those situations, the things I would probably want to ask are, some of it might be more language or tech-based, like, what is a string builder? In which case, you'll sit there and you panic, being like, I don't know what a string builder is, but I know what a string is, and I know what a builder is, and I'm going to hope that this is the right answer. And actually, like a lot of the concepts in one language actually extend to multiple languages. So you can like reuse it, and then you kind of stare at the interviewer's face as they like start squinting at you, and you're like, okay, I'm going the wrong way, and I'll adjust my question, and then they relax, and you're like, well, I'm saying the right things. So like using those cues are going to help for sure to say the right thing, but also like just remembering, like actually this was related to your question earlier about like, is knowledge or getting stuff done important? And certain CS fundamentals, like just having that down and being able to explain it. These are things that are actually things that you're probably already doing in the classroom, right? You're like doing assignments, you're learning the concept, you're being tested on the concept, in exams, you're being tested on the concept in various like application settings. And so being able to explain those concepts, like explain binary search, explain quick sort, right? Knowing that from your classes and being prepared to, it's like pretend it's an exam, but instead of writing it down, it's an oral exam. And that's probably the best way to get through some of those interviews.
Yeah, I can share about mine too. So I actually also interviewed at Descartes. They did not hire me. But mine was, again, very casual, and it was along the same lines. They asked me like what languages I use. At that time, I said like C and C++. And then they sort of like laughed. And then they're like, that they used to use C and C++ like way back in the day. And they know that it's like a hard language and stuff. And so they asked like what, if I could go back in time and sort of tell myself like, what's one thing to focus on? Or if I could tell other students, what's one thing to focus on with C or C++? And I said like pointers. And that's a very like honest answer. It's one of those tricky concepts to get. But yeah, so that one was a little bit more casual. I had another one where I worked at TD. So I actually got the job at TD Bank. And it was in quality, like engineering. And instead of like doing coding, stuff like that, they just like held up a marker and they were like, how would I test this marker? And I would basically, I just had to say like, we would check the requirements and make sure that, like the colors are matching. And, making sure that it's like properly being drawn and all this other stuff. I forget all my quality principles and stuff, but that sort of thing. So that supports what you said about how it's more of like the theory and sort of like what versus actually doing it, right? Like 99% of the employers know you're a student and you don't know anything, or you don't know everything, sorry.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a senior manager and I sometimes feel like I don't know anything. So here we are.
And like, that's the whole point of co-op is like, they get funding from the government to hire students for them to show you and to watch you grow and learn. That's the whole point of co-op, right? So like I found everything to be pretty like relaxed in terms of like, like prepping for the interview and stuff. You should still prep and everything, but
Please prep.
yeah. I did have one other interview. It was a like a leak code style thing, and they emailed me and they said like, oh, you have like till like May to finish this. As soon as you start, it's like 2 hours, and it's 3 questions. So I thought, okay, I have time to like practice my stuff, go on leak code over the winter break, and practice like the SQL that they're asking for and some like JavaScript and stuff. And then I got another email 6 days later being like, you actually only have 1 day left to complete it. And in those 6 days, I did not log into LeetCode at all. So there I am. I had to open up my laptop and quickly do this assessment. And I got 1.5 right out of 3 questions. So yeah, I definitely think that I could have done it if I studied. It was very like moderate level questions. But again, check your spam box for more instructions, just in case. But yeah.
Yeah. Just lightly building on the thing you were talking about, the quality engineering is like, how do you test this marker? And like, there's various like concepts that you need to have in mind, but like, you can like a little bit of the interview. I don't think it's necessarily intentional, but a little bit of the interview is to see how you're thinking on the fly, right? So this is why I mentioned like, it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to make mistakes. It is okay to kind of stumble and be a bit sloppy, but you can come in and like be creative and be like, okay, how, if someone asked me, how would you test this marker? Someone who I'm not at all, I haven't done any kind of quality engineering. I don't know like all of the frameworks or anything, but I would probably be like, well, it's a marker. Like what I would probably do is I would I know what testing is, so I was like, I would make sure I could take the cap off and put it back on, and like it holds in place. I would make sure when I like try and draw it, like, the ink comes out. There's maybe a lifetime for the marker. I would like do it. I would put a robot and do it a bunch of times to see until it runs out, etc., etc. So like you just kind of like think up stuff on the fly and be like, well, it could be this, it could be that, it could be what have you. And then you could also say it could be so to your point about word vomit, as I apparently only come up with things after I have said them. What I would probably do is I would say something and then being like, that is a horrible idea. And so I would then just casually end my sentence and be like, but that would be a really ridiculous thing to do, and no one would actually try and do that, and that would be very inefficient. And the interviewer will be like, yes, this person is very smart for having thought of this edge case, not knowing that I have just said a stupid thing and realized it was stupid at the last minute. So like you kind of like adapt it a little bit, and this is why like if you're anxious and nervous, you don't have that flow. You can't easily think on the fly. You get really worried and hung up about what the other person is thinking of you. As someone who has interviewed hundreds of people, I guarantee you, I forget your face after 3 hours. I just and especially after I write feedback. 6 months from now, no idea who you are. When I worked in an office, I interviewed so many people. And so as you can tell, I'm a very nice person. I love conversations. Conversations come naturally to me. I'm a funny person. People remember me very well. I do not remember anyone. So I would be in the office, like pouring tea or whatever, and someone was like, hi, just like waving in front of my face. And I'm like, I don't know who you are. Who are you? And I'll just be like, hi. And they'll be like, you interviewed me. I'm like, I'm sure I did. So like these people, like, they don't remember. I mean, okay, there is one thing they will remember you for. If you do an HR violation, absolutely, then you will be that guy, right, or that girl, or whoever, right? So don't do that. That's how they will remember you. But otherwise, they don't remember. So if you like stumble along, everyone stumbles. Like really brilliant engineers stumble. Even really experienced people stumble. They're not going to remember it. So they're certainly not going to judge you for it. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about the past experience part.
Yes.
I don't know, I feel like I don't have any programming related experience.
Yes, that is understandable because you are a student.
But I do have work experience before.
Oh, okay. So how many of you are like either non-traditional or changing career students who've like come back? Like there's like a handful of you. Or three. Yeah, like there's always a handful, right? Depending on the situation. So here's an interesting thing. It's really interesting to get those people into the interview because they often come in with a slightly different perspective than everyone else because they've had part of or a whole other career before coming back to school again, right? And so they've been on the job in a different setting, in a different kind of industry before coming via software engineering. So depending on past experience, like for past experience, you should try and talk about like the CS stuff and the technical stuff. For students, like if they're asking you past experience, usually you mention like your student projects or your previous co-ops or your previous internships or what have you. In some cases, either if they ask directly or if you think it might be relevant. Say an example might be, say you worked in the hospitality, right? You were maybe like a chef or you worked in like guest services in a hotel or something like that. And you're now working at a company. So like maybe you worked as a chef and now you work at a company that is like DoorDash or Skip the Dishes. Or you worked in hospitality and now you work for a company that writes websites for hotels, right? In that case, that experience might come in handy, especially in terms of you might be able to mention that experience in terms of like how you use the interface or like what your job was, right? And what kinds of processes you instated in place to help you with your job. And how that might be relevant coming in terms of that perspective coming into software. So you could like frame it that way.
What I'm considering right now is obviously like we all want to do co-op.
Mm-hmm.
At my age, I feel like another 16 months before going into the industry is a big investment.
Yeah.
And I just don't know without the co-op or any relevant experiences, how as an interviewer, as a recruiting person,
We don't care.
You don't care.
No, like it doesn't. So okay, there's some other things. I don't know the details of Ontario labor law. By the way, all of you should read Ontario labor law because we are in Ontario and especially for Ontario employers. But when I was in California, so I also disclaim, I haven't done like any interviewing like in a while because my company and my org is not hiring. So that's why I'm not as familiar with stuff in Ontario right now. But in California, when I was hiring in California, we had to be very, very clear about California labor law. And California labor law prohibits asking, or specifically prohibits discriminating hiring based on a bunch of different protected attributes. And that includes race, includes gender, includes age. It includes certain aspects of a person's background. California is extremely restrictive. It also includes like if you're a parent, if you're a veteran, if you're receiving certain benefits, et cetera, et cetera. And so what that means is interviewers are and people at the employer are legally prohibited from asking you those questions directly. They could maybe infer from your resume, but they are legally prohibited from asking you that question. So from that and as a result, they're also legally prohibited from discriminating based on that experience and based on what your age might be as you come into the program. So as a result, you shouldn't worry about it because if they are discriminating against you for that and it's quite explicit, you have a legal case against them and they do not want to be in legal hot water. So
But
that
they can easily screen my resume out.
sure, but that is like not likely. For some of the bigger firms, we try and actually not do that. There's a big push from there's always a big push in diversity and it changes flavor every couple of years. But some of the flavors for diversity is like we're always looking at underrepresented groups, and underrepresented groups cover a huge span. It's like gender, race, and it also includes non-traditional backgrounds. There's been a huge interest in getting people from non-traditional backgrounds into the workforce because it turns out people who are straight up CS people, academics like me, don't know how any of the world works. And it would be nice if we brought in people who knew how the rest of the world works to tell us what we're doing wrong. So that's one of the motivations for the big push. So like your background actually might come in very, very handy. And they may actually, for some companies, they may actually pick yours over others because they're like, you know how this space works. So you can tell us what is going to go wrong, even though like your coding experience is limited right now. So
Extending on that, I have been told in my current job that I'm doing this as a salesman. They tell me that sales comes in handy at any time at any job. And then because you are saying that non-traditional background is quite kind of in the trend, I don't know if it's true for my case.
there's a thing called a sales engineer. Did you know that?
No, don't ever do that. I want to stay in computer science. No, not again.
You
I
can-
was a technical sales before.
Oh, is it?
It's a great place to work.
One of the things that if you've got a sales background, that might be a natural fit is going into developer advocacy, developer advocate as a role where it's like, you know, the tech stuff, you write some code, but you're also like in front of people talking about stuff like us. So if you love talking about stuff still, that comes in real handy. If you're like, I hate it, I never want to do it again.
I do like it, but it's just that I want to use my coding knowledge too, right? So I want
You will still use your coding knowledge. It's not like you're going to be hired and then you never do
Yeah.
coding ever again.
Yeah, exactly. I
So,
want to do
like,
coding. That's what
yeah,
I love,
yeah.
actually.
They had a question there.
I was just going to add to what you were saying. Another good idea would be to, like, if you, like, while you're in school, you can build apps and maybe have a
Yep.
portfolio.
Yep.
When you get to the interview, maybe carry a tablet or something and just demonstrate it to them and say, okay, this is what I did, this is how I did it. And that might actually go a long way.
Yeah, so that stuff can come in like the past experience interview for sure, where it's like, okay, I have limited co-ops, limited internships, but let me tell you about this cool side project I did over the summer, right, that does this thing. Things like this club, for example. So when I was a student, I was part of the ACM group, Association for Computing Machinery. And one of the things, we were all gamers. So one of the things we did was, this was right as LAN parties went out of style. We hosted LAN parties, big LAN, like 100 to 150 people LAN parties. Well, it turns out to get 100 people to show up, you need a website. You need people to sign up. So we built a website And we had people sign, and we set up signups and stuff. And that was something that we put on our portfolios, was like, we built this thing to accommodate these people signing up. We even had like, you could pick which seat you sat in. That was really cool. So, and so we showcased that, and that was the thing that like got a bunch of us like hired as a result. The other thing you might want to do side projects for, besides just showing to future employers, is it teaches you things and gets you prepped to like learning things outside the classroom more. Yeah.
Before I forget this question, I want to ask
Yeah.
a very important question. In this semester, we have more of team-based development
Mhm.
course. That is a course, and we already have like 5 courses where we have teams, different teams. But what's happening is that I am coming to realize that some teams everyone coordinates well. Some teams just one person. Like I have this team in OOP, just I am just doing coding, and then I have to explain my team, and they still like revert back to me, and there's some kind of politics going on where I don't do, but they get the credits. And I don't know if it happens in industry and what scale is it really prevalent?
Well, let's just put it this way. If I had a team where only one person was coding and the other 4 were not, the other 4 would probably be fired pretty soon.
No, but like how transparent is it?
It's very transparent to the manager. So if you've got a competent manager, so here's the thing. Okay, I'm going to tell you what a manager's job is. A manager's job is to make sure the team is producing output and is executing. Because if the team is not producing output or executing, then why are we paying them so much goddamn money, right? To do nothing, right? So as a student, you're not being paid anything. So it doesn't really matter. There's consequences to you, of course, but the consequences to the other students to not do anything is minimal. Maybe they get a bad grade and that's it, or a slightly bad grade and that's it. But the consequences of the industry, if you're being paid a lot and you're not doing anything for several months, people are going to notice like immediately, and you're on the chopping block. Because so one of the things how many of you have worked in industry for longer than like 6 months? Okay, cool. 'Cause 6 months continuously is what I mean. Yeah, okay, cool. So how many of you have experienced what's called the performance cycle, performance management? All right, so some of you know which trend we're going at. So what happens at many like bigger companies is every 6 to 12 months, you go through what's called a performance review, performance management, where they ask you to write your self-reflection. They ask your peers to write feedback for how you're doing. And this is the way where your buddies can snitch on you if you're not doing your work, to say, hey, this guy, he's not doing anything, like actually. And the manager also then writes feedback downward. And then based on that, we decide a couple of things. One, what kind of performance? Are you meeting expectations? Are you below expectations? Are you above expectations, right? And then based on that, it affects compensation. If you are not meeting expectations, you end up, so first of all, performance should never be a surprise. So when you're not meeting expectations, that's probably after already a couple months of the manager being like, you should be doing work. You're not doing work. Why are you not doing work? Have you considered coming to work and doing work, right? And then so you would get like not meeting expectations officially, and then you go through what's called in the software industry, typically it's a PIP, a performance improvement plan. This is the official written documentation of what are you supposed to get done this week? Have you gotten it done this week? Why have you not gotten it done this week? For many people, and so it is a pain in the ass for like the manager. The people who know this are like nodding. Yep. It's a pain in the ass for the manager. It's a pain in the ass for you. For many people, depending on the situation, it's definitely a very clear signal that like, hey, you're about to be fired. Have you considered just resigning and finding another job that actually works for you? Some people can turn around from PIPs. Typically, when you hit the PIP stage, though, there's probably something really bad going on, and something's gone wrong between you and your employer. So TLDR, it will be noticeable unless a company is very dysfunctional. Now, there could be a case that one person not pulling their weight goes under the radar. But 4 people on a team, that is going to be very noticeable. Why does the manager care? So, as I mentioned, I don't write code. How do people measure what my performance is? Because I don't write code. People measure my performance based on how my team is doing. If my team writes code, then I'm contributing and I'm producing output. So the accountability chain goes upwards. So therefore, it is the incentive is for the manager to make sure their team is executing and performing in order so that they don't get fired. So if their team is not performing and the manager's not doing anything about it, those 4 people are going to go, and then the manager is going to go. So that's the difference between student group work and industry. Yeah, question.
So as students, we don't have any experience, so we're not going to have any experience on our resumes. How do we compensate for that? We have like certifications, Azure certifications, Google certifications. Are they worth anything?
They're sometimes worth things. I would, as someone who didn't do as many internships in undergrad and then went straight to a PhD and then started doing internships, there's a number of reasons why you should do an internship, especially if you've never worked in the real world before. One is to get an experience of what it's like to work in the real world. It's very valuable. You learn about what an employee-manager relationship looks like. You learn about like setting expectations for yourself in a job setting, what have you. So I would really recommend that, like, if you're really close to graduating and it's really hard to fit in an internship, okay, might be tricky. But if you're like only 1 or 2 years in, recommend trying to find an internship of some kind to at least try it out before going into the real world. Now, your original question is, what if I have no experience? Side projects are going to help. You may have a harder time applying to places. So you have to really go and sit down and figure out how to pitch and sell your resume so that you get into the door, into the interview, and actually are on your way to get a job. Does that answer your question?
And the last thing, the certifications.
The certifications, they might work, they might not work. It depends on the certification. There's a billion certifications out there, so I can't enumerate through all of them. Certainly a lot of companies use cloud now, AWS or GCP. If you have cloud certifications, that's going to be helpful in some way. I don't know about tech or language-specific certifications. I think those are hit or miss. The cloud stuff I know for sure is good. Some of the security stuff might be good, but like I know that because I'm in security. Everything else, I'm not sure.
Just to piggyback off of that, in Conestoga there is a lot of group work, kind of both in a good way and in a very bad way.
It doesn't stop.
Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of group work in Conestoga. So like you can maybe it's not a good idea. I don't know. Sorry, you can correct me. But like I do try to like list my group work stuff, and in my group work, especially now that I'm an upper year student, I try to like push like there's the requirements that the prof wants that are like whatever. But then I like try to push it and be like, hey, I did this project, but not only that, like I used this new framework or technology, or I try to do like sprints and like do something with it.
Emil talks to me a bunch, so he hears all my jargon, and then some of it rubs off to him, so it's a little bit of a bad influence. But yeah, if you are a bit more proactive in terms of managing your team, you learn a little bit more. It's basically baby management, but basically you learn a little bit more like how to work with people, how to get people to work with you. Those are extremely valuable skills in the workplace. Nothing is more annoying to me as a manager, as someone who is junior or senior, has lone wolf themselves in a corner, writing things on their own and are refusing to work with the rest of the team. You are going to have to work with the rest of the team in order to be successful. So, and people come in all shapes and sizes and all kinds of personalities and communication styles. So the sooner you learn how to adapt and work with all of that and figure out how to collaborate together despite everyone's different backgrounds, the easier time you're going to have in industry.
Awesome. We are.
I love it.
But yeah, I wanted to thank you for coming.
Thank
I have
you.
gifts. There's also some stuff.
Oh,
Like a
nice.
nice mug, some sticky notes.
Sweet.
Yeah,
The shirts are really comfy.
the shirts
Cool.
are
Very
very
comfy.
comfy.
You can wear them to either the gym or bed.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate Gavin and Emil bringing me on here. I hope this was incredibly interesting and not boring to all of you and useful, but considering everyone coming close to me, it sounds like this was a hit. So,
Awesome. Yeah, we can. Yay! Thank you.
cool. I'm gonna get you the slides.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll share them to like the Discord and everything.
Yeah.
Yo, email me as well. I'm on Discord.
Sure.
And then-
We'll get you to sign up.
And then if there's, so I work
am
in,
on time.
yeah. So I work in security and privacy too. So, and I'm in Toronto, and this guy can pester me to come over at any time. So if you want me to come back and talk about more stuff, because I'm I'm obviously an amazing comedian here. Feel free to reach out and let me know. I'm always happy to come and chat with
And
folks.
also, security is very profitable, especially with COVID and everything. So if you're looking for things to explore,
Yeah,
this is a very good.
cool.
Awesome. I do have giveaways. I don't know what the best way to
Just chuck them into the crowd.
We
the
all have to touch them all in the middle.
Yeah, it's brace.
the first person to raise their hand to maybe okay. I was gonna say to share one thing that you learned today in this session.
What did I learned that for co-ops, it's more knowledge-based, while industry is more practical-based, like do your stuff.
Yeah.
And then I learned that industry is actually much more transparent and much more objective than I expected it to be. I expected it to be quite a political place, but okay, nice. I think it's good.
There will be politics. Fight me for next time for management politics if you want to hear more. So.
Yeah, that's one more thing I learned.
Drama
Awesome.
in every workplace.
Oh, that was it.
Oh,
I
you want to-
probably have enough for one more.
No, I was just going to say that I learned that the interview process is not as rigid as I thought it was, because I didn't know that it was okay to ask to Google something in an interview. I thought that,
Yeah.
no, I just have to know everything before I talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was cool.
You make sure you ask the interviewer that whether you can Google something
Yeah.
first. But like for the pairings, it's okay to Google.
Awesome. If you two could stay back and give your stuff. But anybody else want to share anything that they learned?
How about?
How
How do you join Discord?
do you join Discord? You gotta give this a quick scan here. And then,
Like, the thing is, I don't use Discord. I lost my backup code, man.
okay.
So,
Now we put it on hard stocks.
yeah, you have my email already. I signed up with GDSC.
Okay, for everyone in the
Yeah, my name is
meeting
Kiran.
room, thank you everyone for joining.
Add a thing that like you were at this event.
If
I
you have
get,
any
like,
questions,
really
feel free to
good
drop them in the
add me
Discord and I can.
for fun.
in the message.
Yeah, in the message,
Discord.
be like, yeah, you met me at this thing, and then it's fine.
I'll do it.
But yeah, anyways, I'm gonna stop
Yeah, that
recording,
happens.
close the recording up, and see you later.
Oh, especially since you're very hard
I
at,
know there's
very
tea
bad
in every
at
workplace
remembering
though,
people,
like
yeah?
Yeah, I'm very bad at remembering people. Yeah, so
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
add a note.
I feel that, yeah.
ChatGPT coming up, are you guys like changing your interview process?
What?
Like the ChatGPT coming up?
Oh, are we changing our interview? Oh my God. I literally had another person ask me about Chat GPT and security earlier today. I have no idea. We'll have to see. It's going to be wild out there.
Because like
So-